Hi, everyone. Welcome to Fuelradio. On the line with me today is Lorie Martin. Lorie, welcome to Fuelradio.
Thanks, Rod. It's really fun to be together. The story around the shack started after our daughter's death. And as I mentioned, the first 2 years, I really had a close sense of God's presence carrying me and meeting me. And I'm so grateful for that. I called it grace upon grace, where I would just be given a grace for that moment, for that day. I was often on the floor of my closet in tears, but a grace would always come somehow, and it would be through a bird or a friend or just a thought or a sense or a good sleep. After a couple of years of feeling this sense of presence, I went into a dark night of the soul where everything I'd known of God seemed to fade away. And I just told God, you just go on that back burner over there. I'm really mad at you. I now call it, we're having a domestic dispute. You go over there. I don't like you anymore, and I don't like what you allow in our lives, and I don't get it. I don't get how this could have happened.
Yeah.
We were very shocked by it. It wasn't something that was predicted. At about that point then, I got stuck in my grief. I was stuck. And the shack was being filmed down the beach from our cottage a couple of blocks away. And our friends, Brad and Eden Jerzak, were friends with Paul Young, and co-writers together. And we walked by a sign that said the shack, like a film arrow. And we're like, oh, they're filming the shack right here, just on our beach. And sure enough, at Cultus Lake is where they did a lot of the filming. So Brad connected with Paul, and long story short, Paul ends up being on our movie set on our beach and invites us over. And I didn't want to go, but my therapist said, well, what's the book about anyway? And I hadn't even connected that it was about Mackenzie having this great loss of his own daughter, and the need for some attention to his great sadness and anger at God. So we walk over there, and we meet Paul on the beach, and he just embraced me. They had filled him in on my story. I decided I would just go and show up and see what happened. My bad attitude, and the way he hugged me, he did not let go. So I felt like, oh no, there's something bigger going on here. And I started to cry, and I said, okay, you can let go now. I'm starting to cry. And he goes, I gotcha. And he pulled my head in closer rather than letting me go. And I felt like the spirit needed something very tangible to get my attention, that I was being met by God that day. And Paul walked with me through that whole day, sat beside me in the producer's tent when the scene that they were showing at that moment was of Mackenzie and Mama Papa on the deck, and Papa saying, or Mama saying, Mackenzie, problem is you don't trust me. And he looks at her and says, trust you? I'll never trust you. My daughter's dead. And he flings a cup. I don't know if you saw the movie, but I had to watch that 15 times, and was like a psychodrama of watching my anger and my story and my frustration there, and God saying to me, trouble is you don't believe I'm really good, Mackenzie. You don't believe I'm working in all things for your good. And I was in the same spot, and we were all teary eyes. Dwight, my husband, was there. Brad and Eden were along, and Paul, and we were just all in tears as we watched this scene over and over and over again, till I could start to hear that God was for me, not against me. And yes, God doesn't stop bad things from happening, but he doesn't make them happen. And yeah, it was just a great scene to watch. There's a few other incredible scenes that we got to watch too, but it was a healing day for me, a big healing day. And when I went home, I thought, is this going to last? Or have I just been starstruck? Is this really going to stick? But I felt even then, when I was washing the dishes the next morning, I felt God say, it doesn't matter what happened to you or how it happened to you. What matters is that it happened to you, that this was given to you, these graces and this way of God coming close to me. So really grateful.
Yeah.
And the other one was, Papa saying, you're looking through the knothole of pain, Mackenzie. And I was like, yeah, I'm looking at my life through the knothole of pain. And then where the bluebird comes, we saw that one too, and Mackenzie's sitting on the step, and Papa says, "You were made to fly, Mackenzie, but pain has a way of clipping our wings." And just acknowledging exactly where I was at, and
all the things you're going through at the time. Hey, yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, that's beautiful. You mentioned one thing, because I think so many people struggle with this, and maybe you can help us with this, having gone through what you've gone through, is people getting mad at God and blaming God actually for their circumstances and the things that happen. Like, how were you able to separate that?
Trusting that God is only good.
Yeah.
And that God's grace meets us in everything.
Yeah. I mean, I think a lot of people are going to say BS to that, So.
Yeah. Well, I wrestled for quite a while. A good friend of mine, Dr. Brad Jerzak, who you know, helped me unpackage this in a way that made sense for me, as much as anything mysterious and way beyond our ability to understand can. And it comes from Simone Weil's teaching of that God can either love us or God can control us. And I believe that God only loves us, and God's chosen not to control us or our circumstances. Because you can't control someone that you love, and love isn't control. So for me to accept that God could have controlled all of this, and I get a lot of people sharing their wonderful stories of how God met them so that they didn't end their life, or you hear all of these, and I'm like, well, what the heck, but for me to understand that God gives us choice, and that's really the most loving thing God can do. And that God will meet us in the worst of the worst of the worst and never leaves us. And that God did not cause it, but God does allow it. It's part of the way God proves God's love toward us, rather than not.
So often my own personal spiritual direction sessions end up with, are you going to trust God with this?
Good one.
It's like, oh, dang, that question again.
The thing that served me best probably with that question is, am I willing to do a deep surrender into love, a deep surrender into having the answers, and definitely not the pat answers, and just a deep surrender into love that I don't know all things, and I never will. In our situation, it was a 1,000-piece puzzle that came together. It's very complicated. And so to think that I could actually surrender into love and empty myself of needing to know, of having to figure it out, of trusting the one who loves me most and who loves our daughter most, and is leading and guiding us all into greater resurrection life, into greater redemption of all things. I'm grateful I've been given that grace to hold that space most of the time.